You know, there's a lot to unpack in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. More than just what meets the eye with all the violence and revenge.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in this spectacle, but underneath it all, there's a really complex exploration of race, power, and cinematic influence.
Welcome to Movie Night with Josh Berry, the show where we dissect films to unearth their hidden layers. I'm your host, and today we're joined by my wonderful wife, Sita, who will help us delve into Django Unchained. We're not just looking at the surface level action. We want to understand how Tarantino uses genre, music, and even violence to make a statement about American history and the Western film itself.
Thank you, hubby of mine. And to kick things off, I'd say the unifying topic here is how Tarantino repurposes and subverts the conventions of the spaghetti Western to tell a story about slavery and Black empowerment in the American South. It's a really audacious move, blending genres that you wouldn't normally see together.
It definitely is. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's introduce a recurring element we can look out for. I think the use of music is crucial in Django Unchained. Tarantino doesn't just use a traditional score. He uses specific songs to amplify the emotions, create irony, and drive the narrative forward. Keep an ear out for that as we talk.
Great point. The soundtrack is almost a character in itself. Speaking of which, one of the most striking things about Django Unchained is its violence. It's over the top, stylized, and definitely not for everyone. But I think it's essential to understanding what Tarantino is trying to do.
How so?
Well, the violence in Django Unchained isn't just gratuitous. It's a deliberate choice to confront the brutality of slavery head-on and to offer a kind of cathartic revenge fantasy. Think about the scene where Django finally unleashes his fury on the Candyland plantation. It's shocking, but also, in a way, satisfying.
It's a very specific kind of violence, too. It's not just random. It's often directed at figures of authority or oppression. It's like Tarantino's using the language of the spaghetti Western to rewrite the power dynamics of the antebellum South.
Precisely. He's taking the tropes of a genre known for its lawlessness and moral ambiguity and applying them to a historical context where the lines between right and wrong were supposedly clear-cut, but in reality were anything but.
It's interesting you bring up spaghetti westerns because Tarantino has cited Sergio Corbucci, director of the original Django from 1966, as a major influence. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. Corbucci's westerns were known for their gritty realism, their amoral characters, and their extreme violence. Tarantino has called Corbucci the second best western director after Sergio Leone, praising his surreal, pitiless landscape where villains dominate and heroes barely survive.
So, it's not just a surface-level homage. It's a deep dive into the themes and style of those films.
Exactly. Tarantino isn't just borrowing the name Django, he's also channeling Corbucci's vision of the West as a brutal, unforgiving place where justice is often dispensed with a gun.
And that brings us back to the violence. It's not just about spectacle. It's about challenging the traditional Hollywood portrayal of the West as a romanticized frontier.
Right. Corbucci's films, and by extension Django Unchained, present a much more cynical and brutal vision. One of the chapter titles in the source material is Corbucci's violence style, Mud and Blood, which summarizes it pretty well. He rejected the mythic heroism for gritty, fascist critiquing brutality.
That's fascinating. And it's not just the violence, is it? It's also the moral ambiguity of the characters. Django is a hero, but he's also a killer. Schultz is a bounty hunter, but he has a moral code.
Exactly. They're not simple good guys. They're complex characters operating in a morally compromised world, which makes the whole film more interesting, right?
It does. Now, let's bring it back to the music we mentioned earlier. How does the soundtrack contribute to the subversion of the Western genre?
Well, Tarantino mixes Ennio Morricone's classic spaghetti western scores with soul, funk, and even hip-hop. This blend creates a unique sonic landscape that both pays homage to the genre and simultaneously modernizes it.
It's anachronistic, but it works. It creates a sense of disorientation, as if we're seeing the past through a contemporary lens.
Spot on. And the use of black music in particular is significant. It reclaims the Western genre for black audiences and provides a soundtrack for Django's journey of empowerment.
You know, it's interesting how Tarantino uses these musical cues to almost signpost the emotional beats of the film. There's a moment where Django recalls the whipping of Broomhilda in the track Freedom by Anthony Hamilton and Elena Boynton plays. It's a gospel song, full of longing and hope for liberation. It's a really powerful juxtaposition of image and sound.
It is. And that brings us back to the unifying topic we discussed earlier, how Tarantino repurposes and subverts the conventions of the spaghetti western. He uses music, violence, and character archetypes to create something entirely new.
So, with all this talk about violence, music, and spaghetti westerns, what's a common assumption about Django Unchained that we can examine?
I think a common assumption is that the film is simply a revenge fantasy, a kind of wish fulfillment for black audiences. While there's definitely an element of that, I think it's more complex than that. It's not just about revenge. It's about reclaiming agency and rewriting history.
I agree. It's not just about Django getting revenge on his oppressors. It's about him becoming a hero in his own right. He's not just a victim. He's an active agent of change.
Exactly. He's a black man in the antebellum South who defies the expectations of his time and becomes a symbol of resistance. And that's a powerful message.
It is. Now, earlier you mentioned the violence in Django Unchained being cathartic. But is there a risk of glorifying violence, especially in a film that deals with such a sensitive subject matter?
That's a valid concern, and I think Tarantino is aware of that risk. That's why he doesn't shy away from showing the brutality of slavery. He wants the audience to feel uncomfortable, to confront the horrors of the past.
So, the violence is not just for entertainment, it's a tool for historical reckoning.
Yes, precisely. It forces us to confront the legacy of slavery and the violence that was inherent in the system. It's not easy to watch, but it's important.
Let's bring it back to Corbucci for a moment. How does Tarantino's use of violence compare to Corbucci's?
Well, Corbucci's violence was often more graphic and nihilistic. It was meant to shock and disorient the audience. Tarantino's violence, while still over the top, is often more stylized and cartoonish. It's a way of distancing the audience from the reality of the situation, while still making a point about the brutality of the past.
So, it's a different approach, but with a similar goal, to challenge the audience and make them question their assumptions about the West.
Exactly. Tarantino is using the language of the spaghetti western to critique American history and to offer a new perspective on the legacy of slavery.
You know, there's a quote from the source material that really encapsulates this. Tarantino transplants Corbucci's pitiless West to slavery South. Racial revenge, Navajo Joe parallel. No redemption, hero's mode, but empowers Django escape, soften. It highlights how Tarantino both embraces and departs from Corbucci's vision.
That's a great quote. It really gets to the heart of what Tarantino is trying to do. He's taking the tropes of a genre known for its cynicism and violence and using them to tell a story about hope and redemption.
And the analysis of that quote really shows how Tarantino uses that pitiless element to add layers to the racial revenge aspect of the movie, drawing parallels to Navajo Joe.
Exactly, but it tempers it by giving Django an escape, adding a layer of empowerment that's not always present in Corbucci's work.
Now, let's contrast that with another quote from the text. Corbucci created his own West. Violent, sexy anti-heroes, Influenced Bastards, Hateful Eight, too.
That one speaks to Corbucci's overall impact on Tarantino's filmography. It shows that Django Unchained isn't just a one-off homage, it's part of a larger pattern of Tarantino drawing inspiration from Corbucci's unique vision.
It shows how Tarantino sees Corbucci as a kindred spirit, a director who wasn't afraid to push boundaries and challenge conventions. It's like he's saying, I'm not just borrowing from Corbucci, I'm continuing his legacy.
Precisely. It's a way of situating himself within a particular tradition of filmmaking. And it also highlights the fact that Tarantino's films, like Corbucci's, are often about violence, but also about style, humor, and a certain kind of cinematic cool.
Well, as we wrap up, it's clear that Django Unchained is much more than just a simple action film. It's a complex and challenging work that grapples with issues of race, power, and cinematic history. We keep coming back to this unifying topic of Tarantino subverting the conventions to empower and make a statement.
Agreed. The most important insight here is how Tarantino uses the spaghetti western genre to rewrite the narrative of slavery and offer a new perspective on American history. He takes the tropes of a genre known for its violence and moral ambiguity and applies them to a historical context where the lines between right and wrong were supposedly clear-cut, but in reality were anything but.
And that's why Django Unchained still resonates today. It challenges us to confront the uncomfortable truths about our past and to question the stories we tell ourselves about who we are as a nation.
Exactly. It's a film that stays with you long after the credits roll, prompting you to think about the legacy of slavery and the power of cinema to shape our understanding of the world.
So, as we consider all this, I have to wonder, how do we balance the need to confront difficult historical truths with the desire to create entertaining and engaging art?